Welcome to the Gold Standard here from the 440 Sports Network and lowerbroadhockey.com. My name is Braden Gall. You can get to me on the Twitter machine at Braden Gall. I refuse to call it anything else, y'all.
Mike, you're up.
I'm Michael Gallagher. You can follow me on Twitter at mgsports_.
I'm Emma Lingan. You can follow me at Emma_Lingan.
Today, we are going to take a look at the Central Division. We're going to go team by team. We're going to kind of look through all the different dynamics. Who's going to be better this year? Who's going to be worse this year? What do you need to know about these teams if you're a Predators fan and you don't know about these hockey teams? And who could overachieve? Who could be challenging for playoff spots? Where do the Nashville Predators fit in the Central Division? So we'll get to that today. We got some news and notes from around the league. And, of course, I had a big story on Lower Broad Hockey this week about pressure and expectations. Talked to a bunch of players. I want to get y'all's reaction to that as well. We've got plenty of stuff to do as the roster at time of taping. We're not going to get into like which players necessarily should or should not make the team. Although I'll ask you guys something quick about that. But really, I'm curious what you think the decision making so far has told us about how this organization views some of the players, some of the prospects, and what the current roster might look like. I think that's a more evergreen conversation that matters a little bit more to the organization long term. So we'll do all of that, of course, today. Listen, Sinkers Beverages. Make sure you check out our great and amazing friends at Sinkers Beverages. Also, Bluegrass Beverages up in Michael's area of the city in Mid-State. You got Bluegrass Beverages up in Hendersonville, serving that community, Michael, for 50 years. 50 years, Bluegrass Beverages has been serving booze to your community. How do you feel about that?
Really have an opinion, I guess. I don't know. 50
not
years is a long time.
Grateful?
Super grateful.
Super grateful.
Well, I mean, if you live in Hendersonville, sometimes when you get home, you need a drink because the traffic's so damn bad. So, I mean, hit up Uber Eats and have them deliver it as soon as you get home, and they can meet you there.
Look at that. You look. It only took you like half a second to work in a completely organic read from your life into the ad about Bluegrass Beverages. Traffic in Nashville sucks. You need a drink. Go to Bluegrass. There it is.
I will say my wife is a pretty big wine drinker, so I don't personally drink myself, but she's always looking for new stuff to try, so we'll probably have to stop in a Bluegrass and see what they have.
All right. So, Emma, are you a wine person? Do you like wine?
Yes, but only white, rosé, and sparkling. I'm a girl. I like girly wine.
Wait, what? No Cabernet Sauvignon with a steak? Nothing like that?
Oh, no.
A nice Merlot?
Nope. Nope. Hard pass.
Those all sound like Harry Potter characters to me.
You guys are absurd. I listen. I will say, in my old age, I have enjoyed more rosés than I expected. I don't know anything about any of these wines. I don't know what's a good wine, what's a bad wine, what's the right price point for any of these. I don't know what a tannin is. I just know that it's a thing. But here's what I do know: Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages know a lot about this shit. And you can go in there and say, look, I have a coworker who only drinks fruity rosés. Do you have something good that I could pick up? They would be like, yes, here are the 3 good options. I've got, my wife only drinks Sauv Blanc, so she's not that different than you, Emma. She likes Sauv Blanc. What are the best Sauv Blancs that aren't named Kim Crawford? Here we go. Let's go. Let's go pick up a couple bottles. Here's some good stuff for you. I like a nice cab with a steak. It's about all I know about wine. There you go. Give me a good cab at a good price. Sinkers Beverages, Bluegrass Beverages has you covered. And if you're sitting in traffic, vote for the traffic transit referendum coming up in November. That's a different podcast. All right. First and foremost, I have to start with an apology not to you guys, but to the entire audience and to every Nashville Predators fan in the world. In the world. Last night's Lower Broad Hockey Fantasy Draft, I ended up with UC Saros and Steven Stamkos. I apologize to all of you for ruining the season right out of the gate. Hasn't even started yet. I would like to apologize. I'm sorry. Are you guys superstitious?
I'm waiting for someone to start calling you the homer of the group now, because I think Gover occupied that last year, and now I think that title is reserved for you because you have 2 of the Predators' best players on your roster.
How is Hockey Fights Everyone? Do you agree, Emma? Like, are you one that takes players from your favorite team, or are you one that takes players like Patrick Kane, hypothetically, to watch them suffer?
Listen, I if I've learned anything from doing fantasy sports over the last several years, it's that no matter how much preparation and time and effort and strategy I put into building my team, it is always going to somehow turn out terribly. So I don't even know why I try. It's like I might as well just close my eyes and point, and I'd probably be better. So
I will say the one regret I have from the draft last night, I actually finally got in like an hour before the draft. So thank you for doing that. But
I
the one regret,
had to delete your team and then re-invite you.
Yahoo had a vendetta against me. I don't know. It would let me sign in, but I could not see anything. And then you resent it, and then it's like, oh, magically it's working. But my one regret is the fact that I waited and waited and waited because I was like, oh, I'm going to get Trevor Zegras at the very end of the draft. And then the round I was going to pick him, he went like 2 picks before me. And I was so pissed off because we all know that I am a Trevor Zegras stan. Sure. And I'm so irritated. The same thing happened with Gover. Gover was trying to sneak Novak in and someone picked him like right before he was about to get him.
Listen, shout out to my guy UC, no relation to the goaltender. He's in Nashville. He was doing the draft with us last night. He sent a Zoom for us all to jump on. Brad and Daniel and all you guys who jumped in there, appreciate you guys. He did 2 things. He took Evangelista, of course, that my team name is the Evangelisticals. He took Luke Evangelista right before me, and I said, look, I can't complain because I had 13 picks to do this and I didn't do it before. So it's my fault if I didn't get him, which is okay with me. I'm okay with that. I didn't need more players on my team that I cover. It's fine. I will say this though. UC also took Patrick Kane right in front of me. And that is the strategy that I think everybody should deploy if you're a fan of a team. Take the players you hate the most, because that way you win no matter what happens. If he breaks a leg, I'm not going to say Predators fans are happy about that, but Predators fans probably not too upset if Patrick Kane gets hurt this year. That's all I'm saying. If he does great things, then you win. Your fantasy team wins. I used to draft Phillies every year playing fantasy baseball because I hate effing Chase Utley. I hate him with every ounce of my being. Hate Chase Utley. Piece of trash. Douchebag. Drafted him on every team because I was like, look, if I'm going to have to watch him just destroy New York Mets pitching every night, I might as well get something out of the deal. So
that's great advice if you're a Predators fan, because there's so many people to pick from because everybody has their best games against the Predators, it feels like. So wide pool.
I got Connor McDavid. I did not get like Leon Draisaitl. So there you go.
Yeah, how did you end up with the first overall pick? I'm curious how that happened, the league commissioner.
I don't want it. I didn't like sitting there for like 28 picks before my pick came back. I hate being on the ends. Give me the middle picks. I like the middle picks. Anyway. All right, enough of our fantasy league. Lowerbroadhockey.com if you want. I just want to apologize to everybody because I ended up with Saros and Stamkos, and I feel like that's certain death to the entire franchise. So I apologize. Yes, Josh Wright says if you join the in crowd at Sinkers Beverages, he got hooked up with a Weller 12 just last week. And if you like bourbon, that's good. That's a good one. If you want to jump into the comments, we'll have time for you guys as well. So listen, here's the other thing. Lower Broad Hockey Gold Standard Extra every single Monday or Tuesday-ish with myself and Adam Vingan. You can catch that. It's up on the website right now. So you can go check that out. And it's a lot of data comparing the differences between John Hynes' administration and Andrew Burnett's first season. I wanted to give you guys a little taste of what the conversation was like. And if you want to go subscribe, please go to Lower Broad Hockey. So I want you guys to hear the data here and then we'll react. But here is a little clip, a short clip of Adam and I on our extra edition of the Gold Standard this week.
When I look at the Predators under John Hynes, this is offensively. In the final season of John Hynes, the Predators were 24th in expected goals per game. They were 28th in actual goals per game. So they were on par with what they were supposed to do. They actually scored slightly more. They
should have scored more.
They should have scored more. You're correct. Sometimes they get the expected and the actual mix up. 24th in expected goals for per game, 28th in actual goals per game. So they performed a little worse than they were supposed to, but based on what they were expected to do, it wasn't good. Now, compare that to Brunette in his first season. The Predators were 12th in expected goals per game and 10th in actual goals per game. So it was more closely aligned. And what that shows me was that the Predators were far more dangerous offensively, which, again, if you watch the Predators last season, you don't need a fancy stat to tell you that.
All right, there you go. Adam lands the plane there at the end with, you don't need the fancy stat to tell you they were better on offense last year. They were obviously better.
Breaking news, Andrew Burnett's a better coach than John Hynes.
We'll get to Minnesota in a minute. But listen, they were 6th in offensive time possession last year. They were 20th under John Hynes. I think the common misconception is that they weren't as good, that they were sort of worse defensively. And we had a lot of conversations last year about the defense in front of UC Saros. But if you look at the numbers, they were actually significantly improved on defense last year. I don't know what that means this year without Ryan McDonough in terms of removing him from the back end. But I don't think it's rocket science to suggest that they were significantly better on both ends of the ice last year. The question is, how closely do you think that they can match those numbers this year with a slightly different roster?
Is that a hypothetical question?
I was going to say, I can go if you.
It's a podcast where we discuss things about the team. I'm curious if you think they can match the numbers.
Well, when you don't throw in an Emma, we'll start with you, or Michael will start with you. We don't really know where you're going. So
all right.
I'll go out there. What was the question? Sorry, repeat it.
Well, so they you people, they go from 24th in expected goals to 12th in expected goals. The defense is equally as good. I think they're up to 11th in expected goals last year. The question is, so that makes the Predators a top 3rd team last year in the NHL, which is about right, which is about where they finished in the standings. They're not an elite top 7, top 8, top 10 team, but they're not a middle 3rd team either. Offensively and defensively, do we expect to match that? Do we think the offense is slightly better because of talent? The defense is slightly worse. I just was curious, as two people who are covering the team, what you think they could do this year.
Well, I think offensively, there's no question the expectation is they're going to get better. And it makes all the sense in the world that they would get better when you add 2 40-goal scorers. You add someone like Brady Shea, who's a 45, 50-point defenseman who can chip in 10, 15 goals. I think the expectation is, given how they were last year with no one's going to argue last year's team on paper significantly worse than this year's team. And that's not like a knock on last year's team. Last year's team, I think, overachieved pretty much the entire season. But when you add in Stamkos and Marchessault and Shea, I think that the offense should be better just because, like, take Stamkos and Marchessault. Like, they're going to make Tommy Novak better. I think that's the expectation for everybody, is that Tommy Novak could have a breakout year, probably 60 points or more if all things go according to plan. You look at the third line with Tomasino and Sissons and Evangelista. Like, we expect that line to be better than the Preds' third line last year, which they didn't really have a consistent third line, but we expect whatever they throw out there this year to be significantly better, because you upgraded the top 6. You're by definition, you're upgrading the bottom 6 as well. I think defensively, I love Brady Shea, but I think defensively they're going to take a little bit of a step back. I don't think it's going to be significant, because I don't think the drop off is going to be that noticeable. But I do think when you lose someone like Ryan McDonough, who is one of the top penalty killers in the NHL, that's going to hurt you. When you look at someone like Kiefer Sherwood, Jason Zucker, like, those guys were pretty good two-way defensive forwards. I think when you lose 2 players like that, and that's not a knock on anyone in the bottom 6, but Kiefer Sherwood is probably one of the better two-way forwards on this team last year. When you look at Zucker, like, he was a menace. People hated going against him because he was just tough to play with and he pissed everybody off. So when you look at what they lost defensively compared to what they added, I don't think the drop-off is, like, terribly significant, but I do think overall, at least for probably, like, the first 20, 25 games, like, it's going to probably be a little bit worse than it was last year.
Yeah, I think, obviously the forward group, they got deeper. You didn't just improve one line. Like you said, you improved pretty much 3 lines, because now you don't need, and I know we all love Colton Sissons, but you don't need Colton Sissons to be your second line center anymore. And that's a good thing. And, it kind of spreads the wealth a little bit. You get guys like Evangelista theoretically and Tomasino on the third line. You have more scoring threats throughout the lineup. I don't know if I would say disagree, but I guess I wouldn't be surprised if the defense took a little bit of a step back. I don't think that I'm not going to predict that they are going to, though, because I'm actually very high on Brady Shea. I think that he's actually, now in terms of the penalty kill, I agree. I think that is where losing McDonough hurts you the most. In terms of 5-on-5, though, I actually like Brady Shea. I think of him as an upgrade over McDonough. And I think that he can be a little bit more of an offensive threat. So I think that if we're looking at where this team is supposed to improve the most, it's obviously the forward group. But I think that, defense wise, I don't know. It's a little bit of a question mark for me.
I think something else that kind of plays into this too that oftentimes gets overlooked is who's coaching the penalty kill. Because last year the penalty kill was really bad. I don't know, I have the exact number, but it was like 25th, 27th, somewhere in there. Whoever is coaching the penalty kill, like you lose Ryan McDonough, like we've talked about Brady Shea probably playing on both the PK and the PP. So it just depends on who's kind of like the cornerstone of the penalty kill, like Ryan McDonough has been. But the penalty kill is probably going to look pretty different than what it did last year, just because you have different defensemen. And like we expect that Lozon and we expect that Carey are probably going to have like probably the two most minutes out of the defensemen on the PK. But it also depends on who the coach is, who's swapping in and out, and what that unit looks like. Because not that whoever was coaching the penalty kill last year was doing a terrible job, it's just like the results weren't coming on the ice. So I mean, I'm curious to see who Andrew Brunette puts in charge of that, because I think by the end of the year he had a Brunette was coaching the power play and he had a better grasp on things. I don't think he had a grasp on what was going on with the PK at all.
So I think, I actually talked to Alex Carrier at camp last week specifically about the penalty kill, and it looks like it is going to be, Darby Hendrickson primarily in charge of the penalty kill. But I think, like you said, Andrew Brunette is going to maybe be a little more actively involved than maybe he was last year. And just talking to Carrier, the entire strategy is different now. And I asked him what that means and, in what way. And he said, he didn't use these exact words, but basically said last year's penalty kill was a lot more like reactive and staying at home and blocking shots and, just staying in front of the net. This year's penalty kill is going to be a lot more proactive, and it fits more with what you would think in an Andrew Brunette system. It's hunting pucks and actually not just staying at home and defending, but actually going out and trying to disrupt the power play unit from the other team, try to get the puck from them, try to rattle them, and don't just stay back and block shots. So I think that in that regard, again, this is where I think that maybe I'm not trying to shit on Ryan McDonough and say that you're not going to miss him at all, but I think that he just may not be as big of a loss on the penalty kill, because it's going to be a very different looking penalty kill.
That's kind of what I was trying to hint at too. Like the biggest issue I saw last year was there was way too much freelancing going on the PK, because I don't know if there wasn't a structure in place or if it was just kind of like Emma said, like everyone just go out and react to what's happening in front of you. But it almost seemed like there wasn't a plan once they hit the ice. Now, if Darby Hendrickson is coaching the penalty kill and there's a structure there, like people have defensive assignments and roughly there's like people know what they're doing when they hit the ice. I feel like that there's a potential that the PK could actually, improve from what we saw last year.
I think ultimately that was my, like the genesis of the question is, there's obvious stuff here. They're significantly better on offense, and then they got better with talent. How much better can they be? We're not sure. We don't know how long it's going to take for them to gel. It seems like it should take a lot less time than last year. Talking to Evangelista about that, he's like, look, we're not changing much of this. And if you think about it, you had to acclimate 100% of the roster to the Brunette system last year. This time you need to acclimate 25% of the roster to the system. It should not take as long. The question is on defense, and I think there's a common misconception. Maybe I was guilty of this as well, that that was the problem last year. They were 25th in expected goals against under John Hynes. They were 11th last year, so significantly improved on defense under Brunette. The question is if they do take a tiny step back on defense this year, let's say they're 13th in expected goals or something along those lines. They're sort of above average, but still in the middle, which is not crazy to say. Is the team significantly better in terms of points? 99 points last year. Are they 100? Can they be a 108-point team and challenge for either first or second place in the division if the offense is better and the defense is about the same, or the defense is slightly worse? And we don't know the answer to that question, which is sort of why what I was trying to get at was I think they're going to be better on offense. I don't know what they're going to be on defense. And Saros is still, last year could be totally an outlier in his career. But he does have to go out and sort of show that last year was the outlier by being better this year. And so there's still some unknowns even around all the optimism and the improvements on the roster.
I personally don't have any concerns about Saros, because the way he played in the playoffs, I think that is what we expected from him the entire season. And the fact that he had a couple really good games against a really good offensive team in Vancouver, and we talked about it a little bit beginning of the year, like it was going to be an adjustment for everyone learning Brunette's system. It was also an adjustment for Saros to get used to playing in that kind of system and what was coming at him. I think he figured it out by the time the postseason started. So unless something crazy happens, I expect him to look more like the goaltender we saw in the playoffs than we did at the beginning of last year. And I think if Saros is as good, if not better, the offense is better. Even if the defense does take a step back, I still think ultimately the team as a whole will be better than they were last year.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we know how I feel about UC Saros, so I'm not worried at all.
I mean, look, I drafted him in the second round last night, so I need him to be better than he was last year. All right, so what
I'm hearing is that if he does somehow take a step back this year, it's your fault.
That's totally fine. It's all my fault, as it were. All right, we'll get to the Central Division preview. We'll kind of go through team by team, give you sort of a crash course on all these teams. Where do the Preds fit in? We'll do all of that. But make sure you so stay tuned for that. Sinkers Beverages, of course, in East Nashville, 3-time defending Liquor Store of the Year champion. 3 times, as voted on by you, the Nashvillians. So obviously doing great work serving the community. Next year, I think, is their 40th anniversary. So almost 40 years serving the community. Bluegrass in Hendersonville, 50 years. That's almost, math checks out here, almost 100 years of serving the Nashville community. So make sure you go check them out. Search Uber Eats, Sinkers Beverages, have the booze delivered directly to your house. They drive so you can drink. Quickly, obviously, make sure you go check out the story up on Lower Broad about pressure and expectations. I had a memory in my head, and we've kind of all been talking about the attention that the Predators are getting, and I had a chance to talk to a bunch of players, and you go read the story. I'm not going to give the whole thing away here, but a lot of expectations, a lot of people talking about this team. Anything you guys have to add on pressure, expectations, mental approach? It seems like, we touched on this a little bit last week, but now that it's out, do you guys have any comments, any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns about pressure, expectations, etc.?
I think one thing I liked about the story was, I think it was at the very beginning, the quote from Luke Evangelista, where he was like, people expect us to be good and we expect to be good. Usually when there are expectations, high expectations for this team, they kind of downplay it. They're like, oh, that's people talking on the outside. We tune out the noise and stuff. But Evangelista acknowledged, like, yeah, people expect us to be good. And we also, we have that expectation for ourselves. So it was kind of refreshing to see someone, and maybe you can chalk it up to his naivety being, as young as he is. But it was nice to see someone acknowledge, like, yeah, there are expectations on us. Like, we know that. And we fully intend to live up to those expectations. Because I feel like a lot of times, like, one of the hardest parts about this job is getting a player to break out of the bullshit coach speak answers that they're programmed to give you. It's like, oh, we got to play a full 60 minutes and all this. Like, yeah, we know that. We know how hockey works. So to hear someone be like, yeah, we signed 3 of the top free agents on the market. Like, people are expecting us to probably go to at least a Western Conference final. Like, those are lofty expectations to live up to. So it was refreshing for me to see someone acknowledge that and be like, yeah, you know what? Like, it's there and we intend on doing that. So that's one thing I took away from that.
Yeah, because I think going and getting those guys, the big names in free agency, that is a reflection of the guys who are already there. That is showing that Barry Trotz is saying, all right, like you're pretty close here. Let's just add these couple pieces. But now it kind of puts the onus back on them, back on the players who've been here. Just like, obviously these 2 or 3 guys are not going to carry the entire team, because we saw what happened last year when you had 2 or 3 guys try to carry the entire team. So now we're giving you more depth because we think that you can actually do something special here. And so it is pressure, and it's nice, like you said, to see them acknowledge that.
I mean, honestly, it's just what you want if you're a professional athlete or a competitor of any kind. Like, you want to be viewed as dangerous, as good, as competitive. You want the pressure, and that comes with scrutiny and criticism. That comes with people like us and talking heads and TV and reporters all coming around and being like, well, what about this? Or second guessing decisions. But you'd rather have that, as I think I didn't put it in the story, but Evangelista was like, wouldn't you rather have, isn't it better that than the other way around? It's like, yeah, of course it is. Like, these guys are competitors. And that goes for every player and every athlete, every coach in every sport across the board. So I do think it's clear that Andrew Brunette views his job as managing those expectations psychologically more so than implementing a system. Like that should be already installed last year. Now it's clear, and we talked a little bit about this last week, but it's clear that, and there's a lot of cliches people use, like, oh, you got to keep them grounded, you got to be focused, you got to have your head down one day at a time, chip on your shoulder. Like I get all of that, but that is the goal, is to sort of look, we've done a lot of big stuff, but we haven't won a single stinking thing. And that is sort of the great players in every sport are able to remove all of that and make it about the thing in front of their face. I've got to do this great. And if I do this shift great, or this practice great, or this period great, then we'll get to the result that we want. And that's clearly what Burnett's trying to get across to his team right now, at least, as they go into a camp where, all the expectations and the attention are there. Like every national media outlet is in town trying to get a Steven Stamkos story right now. That's what's happening. Okay. All right.
Yep. Good job. Great analysis.
Quickly, I'll give you a little nugget here. I think there is going to be, I don't want to say like news around the Preds distribution model, but there will be news that is adjacent to that coming up next week. We're working on something at Lower Broad Hockey for you guys with a lot of information about what could happen with the Preds, Bally Sports, et cetera, et cetera. So stay tuned for that. That's coming. I've been working on that for a while, so we'll have good stuff for you there. So stay tuned, and then subscribe, lowerbroadhockey.com. Okay. Also, by the way, did you see the news? I'm sure Gover was devastated. Patrick Laine out 2-3 months. I don't know which media outlet would allow a columnist to make the case for Patrick Laine to be a Nashville Predator. That seems like a stupid thing to write.
Yeah, who would do that, Braden?
At least it wasn't a column about why making the case for Mitch Marner.
That's true.
I just saw the injury and I was like, well, got to take an L every now and then.
I mean, I will say, though, he's out 2 to 3 months. That's kind of a best case scenario. If you saw the injury happen, I would have expected much longer. The fact that he doesn't need surgery is pretty remarkable, because his leg was bending a way that a human leg should not. So, yeah. I guess
I remember watching that. I was like, oh man, I really hope that's not a season ender, because I mean, outside of being a hockey player, like you feel for the kid. I mean, everything he went through last year, missed most of the season in the player assistance program, like came back, got on a team where it felt like he was like a good fit, and you're just like, okay, he's wiping the slate clean, he's getting a fresh start. And I believe he's 26, 27. Like, he's still young enough that he can still get his career back on track. And then to see something like that happen is just, I don't know. It's a sad reality of how violent the sport can be. But I think Emma's right. Like, that is probably best case scenario, because I watched that and I was like, man, I wouldn't be surprised if he's out for the season, because it was a brutal injury. So speedy recovery. Hope he comes back. And honestly, I hope when he comes back that he's still a 30-goal scorer, because he was a lot of fun to watch. And again, I don't have any details on what he specifically has gone through, but like, injuries are generally not good for your headspace in general. A lot of time you spend a lot of time isolated. You spend a lot of time alone with trainers. You spend a lot of time rehabbing away from the team. Not good necessarily for players who have dealt with sort of whatever, personal situations that they've dealt with. It adds a lot of stress to folks in general. And so it is what it is. But to your point, both of y'all, I think the right message there is rooting for him to get back healthy. But again, I saw that injury and I was like, oh, glad the Preds didn't trade for him.
Maybe, you know what? Maybe that's like your Preds luck. Hopefully that just kind of like ran out there. And then we don't have to worry about anything with your fantasy team now.
So I take a huge L professionally. Yes. But to avoid the huge L
for the greater good.
Yeah. Okay.
It's usually how it works.
Good.
That's fine. I'm totally fine with that. I will write a stupid column in order to help Preds players stay healthy. I'm fine with that.
Well, I don't think it was a stupid column. I mean, if the Predators traded for him, he wouldn't have been playing in that specific game he got injured in. So it's not a given he would be injured if he was on the Predators. Like, if he was in Nashville, there's a chance he would still be healthy. So like, it's a guessing game when that stuff happens. So just because he got injured with Montreal doesn't mean he would have got injured here.
Totally fair. And it's very meta of you. I appreciate that. Like, whoa, if he had chosen one other thing in his life, he wouldn't have been here. And
well, I saw a bunch of...
You're right.
I saw Preds fans on Twitter, like, glad we didn't trade for that bum. Like, as if he could help the fact that he got injured in the first place. But two, like, if Nashville traded for him, he wouldn't have been in the game that he got injured in. So, like, he wouldn't have been injured here. I don't understand people's reasoning sometimes.
Yeah, the game would have been canceled. He wouldn't have played.
Exactly.
And then rescheduled for like the night of the opening ceremonies or whatever. Like the Preds are gonna play a preseason game on October 10th in the morning, I'm sure. All right, so quickly,
there is talk of shortening the NHL preseason to like 4 games now. So honestly, it's something that should have been done years ago. But I mean, come on, the Predators don't need an extra preseason game against Tampa Bay. What are you really going to learn from that game?
No, hearing Gover cuss was jarring, though. You know,
I know. I was like, "Are you okay?"
Dropped an F-bomb. It's all your fault. Go check that out. It's all your fault.
That's how you know he's really riled up when he starts dropping F-bombs.
It's like these effing preseason games. What are we doing? It was great.
Yeah.
All right, go check out that show, of course, with Emma and Gover over there and everywhere you get your podcast. Okay. I want to get to the quickly. We'll get to the Central Division, but quickly on the rosters here. I don't really need to. It seems like there's at time of taping, I think they're at 28 players. They got to get down to 23. It's basically 8 guys for 3 spots. I don't know if you agree with that. Is Tomasino basically on the team at this point, considering how they've used him in training camp?
I think so.
Yeah.
So is that sound about right? That it's 8 guys for 3 spots. Stasny is sort of we're not really sure exactly how that's going to work out or how that's going to end. But
for anyone freaking out, Spencer Stasny is waiver exempt, so like they can just put him in Milwaukee. Even I don't know what's going on with his personal issues and stuff like that, but like if he's not on the NHL roster on opening night, like don't have to worry about losing him. Like he can go to Milwaukee.
I'd like to say that I think it's a hugely promising sign that Tanner Molendyk is among those players fighting for a roster spot. I do not think he will be on the big clubs roster, nor do I think he should be on the big clubs roster, but keeping him around as long as possible is a pretty good indicator of how much they think of him. Same thing with Ozzy Weisblatt, to your point, Michael. You've been talking about him all preseason. So I think those are the things you can learn is like these guys are Zachary Leroux. For some reason, I think that Leroux is much closer to this team than like any of us have really talked about. And maybe we've all thought this, but his sort of personality on the ice, if he gets it sort of in check, like we've asked him to do, like Michael, you wrote about on Lower Broad, he gives this team something they need in the bottom 6. Like they need someone to go out there and stir shit up. And as long as it's under control, I really like the personality fit around a bunch of veteran star goal scorers. I actually think Leroux gives them a really nice piece to call on when they want him. So again, I don't think any of these guys are on the team or starting or whatever, but I do think it speaks to Leroux, Weisblatt, and Molendyk being close is very good news for Preds fans.
And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Like, what is the actual point of training camp? Like, the reason these guys are still on the roster very close to the season opener is because these are the guys they want to get an extended look at. Because if there is an injury or any of these players get traded, like a Dante Fabro or whoever, like if anything happens roster-wise, like these are going to be the guys that are going to be the first call-ups. Leroux, Weisblatt, Delgaizo, Wilsby. You can even throw Parson in there. I thought when training camp started, Parson probably had a roster spot locked up, but it looks like Tomasino's kind of taken that away from him. So, I mean, and we've talked about Mark Jankowski potentially being the extra forward and kind of being the healthy scratch, and you play him based off of matchups and stuff like that. But I think Leroux and Weisblatt specifically are very, very close to making this roster. And if there wasn't such a logjam, I mean, there's a logjam at forward and on the blue line, but I think if there wasn't such a logjam, like at least one of those guys would be on the opening night roster.
Yeah, I think that's a good problem to have too. I mean, if they were in a position, and we've said this before, but if they were in a position to make this team right now, then this is not a knock on them, but it's saying that like this team is farther away from, actually contending than we think, because for any of these guys, like there's going to be an adjustment period to the NHL. And so this is not for a team that's trying to full send right now. I think that it makes the most sense. Keep giving these guys the extended look in camp now, get them as much experience with this team, with this roster, with this coaching staff, so that, like you said, when it is the time for them to come up and actually help this team, they will be in a position where they can actually do that. And they're not just, plugging a hole or something like that. They're just, a body taking up space. They're actually going to make this team better.
And to clear up the situation on Molendyk, because everyone gets confused when it comes to this, you need 25 games in a CHL league, in the junior leagues, in order to have that count for a season. He only played 17 his first year, so therefore he does have to go back to juniors if he's not on the NHL roster. the Preds can have him for 9 games, and then they can send him back, and they don't have to worry about anything. But he's not eligible to go to the AHL this year. If he turned 20 before the end of the year, he would absolutely be able to, but he doesn't turn 20 until next year, so therefore he has to be either in the NHL or back in the WHL.
Damn it, Tanner Molendyk, you're too good too early. That's the problem here. I think, and Josh says this, he's rooting for the 9-game tryout. If there's no harm, it doesn't affect his entry-level contract. It doesn't affect his status. If there's no harm to it, maybe 9 games tryout and getting to see him is worth it. It gives.
They did that a few years ago with Sam Girard. Ironically, they ended up trading Girard after that 9-game tryout. They don't have to worry about that with Molendyk, but they did it before. What's the harm in seeing what you have with this kid and just because you play him in those 9 games doesn't mean he has to be playing 25 minutes a game. You can see how he holds up in one game, 12 minutes against an NHL offense and kind of see how he handles that.
But ultimately, to your point earlier about the logjam at the blue line, they have a lot of veteran pieces that are clearly more experienced and maybe better than him right now. So he'd have to be very good to knock them out of a spot to get actual minutes versus being a healthy scratch. And there's no reason to have him on the team if you're going to healthy scratch him. Is he better than Del Gaizo? Is he better than Fabro and Shen? And who's going to come out of the lineup, I think, is ultimately the question. It doesn't mean that they're all guaranteed spots for the whole season, because I think they can upgrade on defense if they wanted to. But they sort of have a bunch of guys who are capable and probably more capable than Tanner Molendyk. And you can't have a young kid out there making a mistake in critical early games just to give him some time. You know what I mean? This is a tough call, I think, for them. There's no risk for him, the player. There's more risk for the team, frankly, in those 9 games.
Yeah, that's my concern. Not concern. I don't think that Tanner Molendyk playing in 9 games is single-handedly going to cost them 9 games. I don't think that, but that, start to the season is so important. And I think that it just like you said, if there's no risk to him, the player, sure, why not? But I'm less concerned about him right now and more concerned about the team.
Yeah, and I tweeted this out yesterday, and of course Twitter trolls had a field day and just shitting all over me. But yes, I understand.
What else do trolls do on Twitter?
Exactly. I understand that because the Predators have 7 NHL defensemen, Tanner Molendyk can't make the roster. The point of that tweet was to show how high that everyone in the organization is on him, that they really, really want him on the NHL roster, and it almost feels like they're looking for a reason to put him there. But you just can't with Shea and Yossi and Lauzon, Carrier, Shen, Fabro. And if Stastny comes back, Stastny deserves that spot more than Molendyk does right now. And honestly, Molendyk's not gonna regress by having another year in juniors. It's not like it's gonna be detrimental to his development. Right now, it feels like Barry Trotz is looking for every reason to keep him on the roster, and I just don't think they're gonna find that reason by the 10th game of the season.
Their 7th best defenseman has won 2 cups and played 16 years in the NHL. It's hard. It's going to be hard to crack that. And to your point, Emma, and both of you, it's a great problem to have a player at 19 years old to be good enough to consider this option for. And if you send him back, you still got the option next year. So I know fans want to see him. I'd like to see him. Let's see how he does it. Because every now and then, and this is something the Preds fans, you guys I'd have to go back and dig this up. I don't know when Ryan Suter debuted or when a couple of other players debuted. But at the end of the day, you remember as a hockey fan, the 18 or 19-year-old that comes up and sort of kind of sticks, right? Those are historically memorable players around the NHL. And the Preds have never, unless I'm wrong, can you remember a phenom, a dynamo that came up as a 19-year-old, as a teenager and kind of stuck at least close to sticking? That's an exciting thing for a fan base to see. And
did Seth Jones, was he not born? Did he never exist?
How old was he when he debuted for the Preds?
I'm pretty sure he was 18 or 19. They drafted him, but they threw him right into the lineup, and he wasn't great. I think he came in with these expectations he was going to be Shea Weber, but he was on one of their top 2 pairings for a couple games, and he eventually ended up settling on the 3rd line. But I'm pretty sure they played him right away, and he was young, and you could tell that there were going to be growing pains. But he eventually turned into a really great defenseman.
19 years old, 77 games played as a 19-year-old in his age 19 season. I did not cover the team in 2013, but yeah, you're right. That's what I'm asking is who fits.
He's the only one that he's the only guy that there's an example of, but yeah, that it's happened once.
Okay. There you go.
But Seth Jones and Tanner Molendyk are two vastly different defensemen. Like they played different games. Molendyk is more speed and skill, whereas Seth Jones was more of like your typical defensive defenseman. So obviously they run two different systems. I don't think Seth Jones back when he was drafted would fit in this Andrew Burnett system right now, just because I don't think it's conducive to his skill set.
No. I agree. This is going to date me, but like I remember watching Dinas Zubris play for the Flyers in the playoffs in like 1997 as an 18-year-old. I'm thinking like, that's cool. And there's plenty of those guys that do that. And the Preds have only, I guess you're right. Seth Jones is the only one now that I should have done some more digging on this, but that's sort of ultimately the question is when's the last phenom they've had? That was 10 years ago.
I'm pretty sure like Yossi wasn't a phenom. He was a second round pick, but I'm pretty sure he came up like in the middle of the season too. And the Predators have a tendency to ease these kind of guys in, to ease these top prospect, especially defensemen, to ease them in and not really throw them out there. So if Molendyk did make the roster and he did stick and they didn't send him back to juniors, like you're putting so much pressure on him to be great this year. And I don't think that Barry Trotz wants to do that because he knows how badly that can mess up development.
Delgaizo, Stastny, Molendyk, Wilsby, Blankenberg, Parsonen, Weisblatt, and LaRue. Those are the 8 that I'm counting for 3 spots. My guess is you get Stastny gets sent back. Most of these guys are sent down. You probably get what? Parsonen and then Delgaizo and who else? If you had to guess on those 3 of those 8, who you got?
Who are the 8 again?
I counted Delgaizo, Stastny, Molendyk, Wilsby, Blankenberg, LaRue, Weisblatt, and Parsonen for 3 spots. So I'm assuming it's one of the defensemen, Parsonen plus 1 would be my guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think Delgaizo and Parsonen for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know that any of those guys, like, again, you don't have to have 23.
Yeah,
also.
True.
Like,
that's true.
You could.
I wouldn't rule out Burnett going with 22.
Yeah, like I wouldn't either, honestly. Like I think the only ones to me who are actual locks for those spots are Delgaizo and Parsonen.
And that is assuming Tomasino counts as one already, which fills the only spot in the starting 12. If you leave Jankowski in there, then Parsonen is your scratch or one of the 2. And so are you going to carry 2 forwards? I don't know, especially if you want to put them all down and get them seasoning right away and have them active every night and have Weisblatt and LaRue and all these guys playing in Milwaukee, then great, go for it. And Molendyk, I think, is obvious. He's either the 23rd guy for 9 games or he's out of the quote unquote out of the professional organization for the year at least as he goes down. Okay, quickly, Central Division. This was the toughest division on paper last year in general. Do you guys think it's there again this year? If you had to look at across down the list.
I think so. I mean, if you look at, they're very top heavy. You look at the top 3, I would argue that they probably have like the deepest top 3 out of any division in the NHL. And that's Dallas, Nashville, and Colorado.
Yeah.
Okay. Short answer. Let's start with the top then. And let's start with Winnipeg, strangely enough.
I wouldn't say that's starting at the top, but okay.
110 points last year. Vezina Trophy winner Connor Hellebuyck. They sort of clearly overachieve. They finish ahead of Colorado. Colorado sort of consistently one of the best regular season teams over the last 7 years, kind of right in that 107 to 110 range pretty much every year. You kind of know what they're going to get in the regular season. Different story in the postseason, but you know what you're going to get there. Winnipeg was the most volatile. They finished much higher than people expected. They are back down to 4th according to Vegas. They're plus 700 to win the Central Division, plus 1,100 to win the Western Conference, and their point total is 95.5 according to Vegas. They crushed that last year, and they bring back most of the team. This is a team that falls down to 4th place in the division automatically, and they're not one of the top 3 contenders because of the moves Nashville has made and because of what they've done. Why Winnipeg not able to replicate 110 points?
Because they lost a lot of pieces.
Yeah, I think, the pieces they did lose, the big ones would be Sean Monahan, who went to Columbus, and Tyler Toffoli, who went to San Jose. Those are 2 big pieces of your forward group that you've lost. You're now expecting Cole Perfetti to come up and play a larger role, which I'm not saying he can't, but he's just unproven yet because, he hasn't had that opportunity yet. So it's like there's a lot of question mark there as far as how that's going to go. And I think that, they also have a new head coach. I mean, he's not totally new. He was an associate to Rick Bowness. I think the last 2 seasons. So it's not like brand new, like when Andrew Brunette came into Nashville, but I think it's like that there's something to be said for that. And I think that honestly, they don't really have a like superstar scorer in their forward group. They're really going to have to count on balanced scoring throughout their lineup. I mean, you have guys like, you have Mark Scheifele, but he's not, I wouldn't consider him like an elite center in that regard. I just think that Hellebuyck here is the great equalizer. And I think that he is the reason that they're even, that even the last like 2 years that they have finished as high as they have.
Yeah, I mean, Toffoli and Monahan are obviously the big losses too, but they lost Brossoit, who's a pretty good goalie. He was, if you're gonna pull Hellebuyck, if you're gonna rest Hellebuyck, you want someone like Brossoit that can go in there and play as well as he did. I mean, they also lost Brendan Dillon and Nate Schmidt. Those are 2 really good defensemen. Those are good, solid second pairing defensemen. So their defense is going to take a step back. Their offense, I feel like, is going to take a step back. Then also, too, I wonder what kind of headspace Nikolai Ehlers is, because they spent the offseason trying to trade him. And he's going into camp, or he's in camp now, getting ready to start the season, knowing, like, hey, there was a good chance like they were trying to get rid of me. Also, Rutger McGroarty, the whole thing that happened with him, when you have a head coaching change and your top prospect wants out, even though he's been told, hey, we're going to sign you, we're going to put you right into the lineup day one. Like, he knew he had a guaranteed spot on this roster with a new head coach that was going to basically just do whatever he wanted because they wanted to keep him, and he still wanted out. I just wonder if there's something going on in that organization where, like, I don't know if it's a culture thing. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I feel like Winnipeg is going to, there's a good possibility Winnipeg's going to have a lot of dysfunction this year.
They seem like the most volatile team from year to year, and it seems like it's been going back 5-6 years now. I think the coaching change is, Emma, I think that's the change that I think is the most interesting, because that could stabilize some of this if he's good, and it could stabilize the volatility. And if it's not, it could enhance the volatility and make it worse. Hellebuyck is the guy that Hellebuyck just makes it more interesting in general. So they're 95.5. Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say something else too. I did a story earlier in the off season on Lower Broad where we looked at kind of which team got better and worse compared to like their key additions and departures and stuff. Looking at Winnipeg, so they had a minus 38 goals above replacement. So that like ranks 30th in the NHL. So looking at what they added compared to what they lost, like they were hit pretty hard. So
okay. Make sure you check that out. Winnipeg, 4th place in the division, going to be picked 4th by a lot of people in the world, just in general. Better chance to finish in the top 3, or better chance to finish in the bottom 4?
Bottom 4.
Okay. 95.5 points, over or under?
Way under.
If you're gambling.
Under.
I'm going like 85 points, maybe.
I mean, St. Louis had 92 points last year, and they're not good. So it's not anybody can get to 90 points these days in the NHL. Okay, all right, you're going 80. Okay, all right, then let's go to Dallas and Colorado. Which 85. One is more? Okay, Dallas and Colorado largely tied according to Vegas from a point standpoint and from an odds standpoint. Plus 220 for Dallas, plus 240 for Colorado. 102.5 points projected by Colorado. 103 over under on Dallas. Which one? If one of them is going to fall down, let's hypothetically say behind another team, whoever that might be. Which one is it?
Colorado.
I go Dallas.
All right. And why? Emma, we'll start with you.
Goaltending. I think that they really need to cut down on their goals against. I think that has kind of been a major issue, and just also a little bit of instability with their roster situation. Just like, what's Landeskog doing? Like, yeah, we know he's coming back, but when and how effective is he going to be when he does come back, and who does he move out of a spot and all that? I think they did, it was really important that they locked up Casey Middlestat as their second line center, because former Predators center did not fill that void for them. So I think that it was a good thing that they addressed that. But I don't know. To me, it's the goaltending that is their biggest issue.
Are you? Hang on, Mike. Are you interested in the young upcoming star backup guy, Noonan? Is that how you say his name?
What do you mean? Am I interested in him?
Is he capable of fixing that problem? As a guy that many people are very high on from a from a young goaltending standpoint?
I don't know. It's hard because, again, I'm not saying he for sure can't fix that problem, but he's so unproven that, like, you just don't know.
Okay. Dallas, Mike, make the case.
What worries me about Dallas is just everything they lost, and specifically on defense. I mean, you lose Joe Pavelski. That's a pretty big hit to your offense. He had 27 goals, 67 points last year. Like, that's a lot of replacement, or that's a lot of production to try to replace. And then you look, they lost Chris Tanev, they lost Ryan Suter, they lost Yanni Hakanpää, they lost Scott Wedgwood, who's on the Predators now. And I know they signed Casey DeSmith, who's a pretty good backup too, but I'm probably much higher on Wedgwood than a lot of other people are. So even though DeSmith is still like a pretty good backup, I still think that you took a hit with the backup goaltending as well. But to lose guys like Tanev, Suter, and Hakanpää is a really underrated penalty killer. So what worries me about Dallas is I still think the offense is going to be fine. I think them keeping Matt Duchene there was a great move for them, and it's not costing them anything because the Predators are footing the bill basically. But you have a guy like Jason Robertson that can go out and put up 80 points. You have other players like Roope Hintz and Wyatt Johnson, who I think could probably be even better than a 65-point player this year. I feel like the offensive talent is there, and it's going to be there. What really worries me is how they replace the three key big players they had on defense. I just don't know. I think Dallas can outscore most teams. I don't know if they can hold other teams to less than 3 or 4 goals a game.
I think don't sleep on Matt Dumba. They did go and add him. It's not like there's just this gaping hole in their defense. I think I agree with you that those are big losses. Like, I'm not trying to diminish that, but I think that they're going to be okay. Like, yes, on offense, yes, you lose Pavelski. That's a big loss, but that kind of opens the door for Wyatt Johnston to kind of come up, take that top line role. And he's with, Roope Hintz and Jason Robertson. Like, that's a scary line. And I think that they can do a lot of damage. And so I don't know. I think that on defense too, there's now, there's what's his name? He's huge. He's like 6'6" defenseman. They have Bichelle, I think.
Oh, Lian Bichelle.
Bichelle. Yeah.
Bichelle.
Yeah, Bichelle.
Yeah, that guy.
I tried to look. I tried to make his name a little fancier, but yeah, no, he brings a lot of size, a lot of physicality to the defense. Again, like there's definitely like questions there, but I just think they're going to be fine.
Yeah, I mean, look, Bichelle's 20. He's huge. Like Emma said, he's 6'6", 225 pounds. Like, if he hits, yeah, that's great. And look, they did add Dumba. He does have experience. I think he's probably, like, in my opinion, he's an average defenseman. You have Thomas Harley, who's 23, so he's really young. You have really good guys like Heiskanen, Asa Lindell. Like, they still have solid defensemen. But when you lose guys like Tanev and Suter and Hakanpää, like, you lose a lot of experience. You lose a lot of guys that you don't really have to worry about. If you throw Lian Bichelle out there, he may be great, but also, like, there's going to be growing pains because he's only 20. So that's kind of what I was alluding to, is like they have the potential to replace those guys that I mentioned, but like they're all really young, they're inexperienced, so there's probably going to be some growing pains when you insert guys like that into the lineup. So when you're going against trying to stop offenses like we think Nashville's going to be, and like the offense Colorado has, I would rather have guys like Suter and Hakanpää than having young guys with upside, because you don't know what they're going to do.
I think there's very good and easy arguments for both why Colorado and Dallas will stay where they are, which to me is very simple. Jake Ottinger has a bounce back season-ish. He wasn't as good last year. He's a bounce back season. That's certainly a better situation than Colorado's in when it comes to the goaltending, to Emma's point. They have as much balance as anybody I can think of in this division and anywhere else, with a lot of veterans, a lot of 20-goal scorers on that team. I think they had 8 last year. Just a very all-around balanced team. They also have this sort of innate thing that happens in the NHL. When you get close and you've built a team that is always close, a lot of times, and I said this last year about Dallas, I was they were a game or two away from getting to the Cup final again. That is a team that is trying to finish the deal. And when you have a lot of veterans that are trying to finish the deal, a lot of times, like, to me, they've got staying power to some degree in that argument. And I don't know, you look at that team, like when you replace Suter and Pavelski, like 80 years of life with two guys that are like half the age of Suter, it can be a bad thing. It can also be a good thing for your team, to get rid of guys who are like almost 40 years old. So we'll see. It seems like they're also going to lose like one of those guys every year from here on out. Like it feels like every year they're going to have another guy retire, and it's like your window is now. And so I think they're very motivated. Colorado, it's just like they're going to outscore so many people. And they've been consistently doing that for so many years that I don't think it's going to slow down anytime soon. But I kind of lean. I'm going to pick them probably top 2. I would lean Colorado, I guess, if I had to pick one. All right. Minnesota. I went to the dentist this morning, and I feel like playing Minnesota this year is going to be like going to the dentist. Like, it's going to be tricky. It's going to be difficult, but you probably walk away feeling okay. So John Hynes took over last year, a chunk of the way into the season fairly early. They went 34-24-8. And let me guys, shocking development. Number 1 in the NHL in high danger defense. One of the worst teams in the NHL, high danger offense. Shocking turn of events for a John Hynes coached hockey team.
Welcome to John Hynes hockey.
But it means their floor is very high, I think. I think they have a high floor, meaning they're going to get to like 90 points, almost guaranteed. They'll have a winning record, almost guaranteed. I don't know if that's good enough to make the playoffs or challenge for anything at all, but they're going to be a tough out, and they're going to play you hard, and they're going to make you work for it. It is what it is, guys. Minnesota they are what they are.
I think Minnesota's issue, at least offensively, is they're very similar to the Predators from last season. They're like a poor man's Predators in the sense that they relied very, very heavily on their top 6. I mean, for the Preds, it was the top 3 plus Roman Josi, so we'll call that a top 4. But there was a massive drop off in scoring from their top 6 to their bottom 6, and they just didn't really have the depth. Now, what benefited Nashville is that their top 6 or top 4 is much better than Minnesota's, or at least it was last year. Not each individual piece. I mean, when you have Kirill Kaprizov, like that's another story. I'm not trying to say that right. Gus Nyquist is better than Kirill Kaprizov by any means, but I think that collectively, Nashville's group was stronger. And so I think that's the biggest issue. And that's the issue that, for the Preds that Barry Trotz went out to address is like, we need to minimize that gap between the haves and the have-nots on the team. And I think that Minnesota has not yet figured out how to do that.
Yeah, I think the team you saw the Wild be after John Hynes took over last year is the team you're going to see this year, because compared to the rest of the teams in the Central, like they have probably the roster is most similar to what they had last year. So like, yeah, they added Yakov Trenin and Travis Boyd and Devin Shore and a couple other guys, but not really any needle movers that are going to really make a difference. And when you look at their net production added, 17 goals, 33 points, their net production lost, 19 goals, 41 points, it's basically a wash. So basically the team you got last year is the team you get this year. And I think what could help them and maybe set them aside or set them apart from what they were last year, which was a mediocre team, what could potentially help them become a possible playoff team is they need 2 young guys, Matt Boldy and Marco Rossi. They need those 2 guys to take a step forward, because those are high draft picks that you drafted, you brought in to be top 6 contributors. Boldy had a good season, 29 goals, 69 points, but I think you need him in the 30 to 35 goal range, probably close to 70, 75 points somewhere in there. And I think Rossi, you need him to produce more than 40 points. If those 2 guys pick it up, in addition to what Kaprizov is doing, and Eriksson Ek and Zuccarello had a 60-point year last year, and I think Brock Faber probably does a little bit better offensively. Like, they have some pieces. I just don't think John Hynes is the guy to get that production out of them.
Boldy is also still a little bit of a question mark because he's still injured. Now, it doesn't appear to be like a serious thing. He could be back. He probably should be back by the start of the season, but you don't know how much of a toll that's taken on him. So it's just, that's something to consider too.
Marc-Andre Fleury, probably his last year, I'd imagine, correct? And who knows what the net.
I feel like we've been saying that for 5 years.
Yeah,
did you see what he did in their Minnesota's preseason game? I don't remember who they were playing, but
no,
he wasn't. This is just like last night. I think he wasn't playing in the game, obviously, because preseason. So he put on like a like mustache, wig, and glasses and joined the ice crew in the middle of the game, and he was like shoveling ice, and it was great.
It's
It
the
was
most
really
Andre
funny.
Fleury thing I've heard. That's great. Very Bobby Valentine of him. Also a 90s reference there. I'm getting old, guys. All right, let's get to Utah because this is I think the most interesting team. I don't know if they're going to win enough games to even challenge for a playoff spot. I think they overachieved slightly even last year. Their projected totals, they had 77 points last year. Their projected point totals 88.5 over under, which means the gambling public in Vegas thinks they're already a 10, 11, 12 point team better than last year in terms of plus points. They had a ton of guys that are very, very young, all score 20 goals. You got Keller and Cooley, and Gunther wasn't even one of them. Krause, Schmaltz, et cetera, on and on and on. They've got, I don't know if Connor Ingram is great or not in terms of what he's going to be, but there's excitement around this organization because of the change. They've kept a lot of pieces in place, and whether it's coaching, front office, stability, these are very young players. I could absolutely see these young players clicking about a third of the way into the season and them being a pretty tough out for the entire second half of the year. I would take over the 88.5 points, and I think they're ahead of Minnesota in the standings, and I think they could challenge Winnipeg for fourth place in the division. I don't know if that's good enough for a wild card spot, but I like this Utah team. I think there's going to be some inherent juice and momentum with a lot of young players playing in front of what should be an energized crowd every night. I think there's a lot to like about this Utah team. I'm fascinated by them.
Yeah, I think that they could very well end up surprising people this year. And I say surprising starting from a baseline of we don't know what they're going to be. Like, we don't really know what to expect. But like you said, they have these exciting young players. They also have, guys like, they signed Mikhail Sergachev. They went out, they got Ian Cole, that's another Stanley Cup champion and who can bring some stability to the back end. I think the biggest question is going to be Sergachev. Can he rise to the occasion of, like, he's pretty much, when you sign him to that roster, like, you're expecting him to be your guy. Like, you are the guy. Can he be the guy? Because he, with Tampa, he was one of several guys and like he wore that hat well, but now when it's just kind of him, like, I'm not saying that he's going to regress or he's not going to perform at all, but I think that it's a kind of pressure that he has not seen yet at the NHL level. And so I think that is going to be, again, I'm not saying he can't handle it. I just don't know. So I'll be interested to see.
I kind of view Utah. I think Utah can be this year what the Preds were last year, where we don't know what they are. They could surprise a lot of people and be a wild card team. And I think and that's predicated too on, there's like all this novelty of it's all new. There's everything moving to Utah, all that stuff. But I think what can happen, and I'll point out too, I really like the moves that they did. Like, you add John Marino, you add Ian Cole, you add Sergachev. Like, you basically rebuilt your blue line at the draft by adding those three guys. And I think John Marino was a very underrated addition. I know he was someone who was linked to the Predators. Sergachev, I think, is someone who can, like Emma said, like, you need him to be the guy. Like, in Tampa, he didn't have to do that, but I think he's someone that is going to be like kind of one of the faces of the franchise. And I think Ian Cole is a very underrated, like, second or third pairing defenseman too. But I think Utah can make a run at a potential wildcard spot, but because there's so much potential and all these guys are young. We already know Clayton Keller is great. He's amazing. If Logan Cooley takes a step forward in his development, then you have two really good top line players right there. And then you look at if Lawson Krause can take a step forward in his development. Dylan Gunther, I think, had a decent season last year. I think there's room for improvement with him. You look at those three guys, if they take a step forward, and if the defense is what we think it's going to be with what they already have and the three guys I already mentioned that they added, like, there's the potential for this to be a playoff team. Like, it really is. It's the unfortunate part is it's all predicated on those guys that are 20, 21, 22 taking the next step forward in their development. If that happens, Utah can be dangerous.
That's why I don't know. Like, my thought is first third to a half of the season, they're finding themselves, they're finding out what the new building and the fan base and the, all this new stuff kind of comes together. By the second half of the season, they're playing pretty well. They've all developed together. All of them are very high pedigree players in terms of they should have a lot of upside and a lot of talent. And by the second half, I think they surge to the finish line and maybe don't have enough to get into a wild card spot, but they could absolutely finish fourth or fifth. And maybe it's just because they're not quite there yet, and they come into next year with actual expectations of being a playoff team. They've done it the right way for, the way Colorado did it all those years. This is a team that stockpiled draft picks, drafted well, and I don't know if it's got lucky with an entire move and a rebrand. By the way, I don't know if they're going to have 50 plus games are going to be played in Phoenix over the air for free because of the broadcast partnership with Scripps. It's going to be fascinating to watch.
But did you see what Vegas is doing now? Now Vegas is trying to poach that fan base, and they're broadcasting all the Golden Knights games in Phoenix too.
Oh, I would assume if you've got a choice to watch your old team with a new state logo and a team that's closer, I think you're either hate watching Utah or you're not watching them at all. I think you much rather watch Vegas, honestly. I mean, unless you're like, I don't know how you could transition to a Utah fan after I know it's not the player's fault, it's the owner's fault, right? That wanted all this. I think the branding is great. I think the uniforms are great. I think it's a little too close to Seattle color palette wise, but I think it works really well. Seattle's one of the great expansion launches of all time. This is also a great rebrand and a cool looking. The whole deal looks great, and I think they got a lot of young players to be excited about. So it's going to be an interesting team to watch, especially in the second half. Quickly here, I know we're running a little late. Go to Sinkers Beverages, check out Lower Broad Hockey, follow Emma and Mike on the Twitter machine there. St. Louis, they can't really score. Jordan Binnington covered up for a lot of problems last year. How different are they going to be from that sort of dossier right there, Emma? How different are they this year?
I mean, I would say they have upgraded ever so slightly on defense. But offensively, I'm with you. They don't really have anyone that scares me, to be honest, on that team.
Yeah. I also, apparently the Preds just can't get rid of fucking Ryan Suter in the Central Division because he's going to be in St. Louis this year. So that'll be fun. That'll be fun. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, they do have a couple guys like Cairo. He had 60, 70 points last year. Robert Thomas had an 80-point season, I believe. Like, they have some guys that can put the puck in the net, but the problem is, like, they only have 2 of them. Everyone else is just kind of mediocre. So, I mean, if I don't know who else they have on their team. I mean, Jake Neighbors, I guess, if he pops off, sure, maybe. But I think they're probably going to be an 85, 90-point team, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, what you have, what was it? Buchnevich was the big contract in the offseason, and then they signed P.O. Joseph from Pittsburgh. I mean, I don't know. I think I'm with you. Maybe I shouldn't have said there's no one that scares me, but there's not enough guys that scare me on that team.
Brandon Saad's still there. I guess I forgot about him too. But if I look at that offense, the only 2 guys I'm worried about scoring on me are Thomas and Cairo. That's it.
Yeah. 25th on the power play, 26th on 5-on-5 on offense last year. They're just not good. Defensively, I do think they're going to be a little bit better. That might make them difficult to play against because the kind of the game they're going to play. And I assume that no player's ever played on all teams in a division. I assume that's never happened, but of course he's now.
Ryan Suter's really trying hard to be the first.
Suter's got 4, right? He's missing Colorado, Winnipeg, obviously Utah / Arizona, and Chicago. I assume he'll finish his career in Chicago. I assume that's what he'll do.
Has to.
All right. Speaking of, not a lot to say about the Chicago Blackhawks. This team was bad at hockey last year. Real bad at hockey. Minus 111 goal differential, the lowest scoring team in the league, 179 goals. Bedard didn't play a whole season. He got hurt last year. Of course, he still looked the part, though. They've added some veterans to try to help the youth develop and kind of come along. They feel like they're 2 years behind Arizona / Utah, in my opinion, in sort of the trajectory there. I guess a slight improvement. It shouldn't be that hard with 52 points last year. They're over under 73.5. You think they get to 73?
I think they'll stretch it to get to 70.
They're just handing out points to the entire Central Division is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
I will. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say 73. I would say 70. I could see him getting to 70, but I don't know. I mean, where you do have, if you're Chicago, I mean, I don't think that this is going to completely turn your team around, but they have Taylor Hall coming back now, and he was injured all of last year, so that is at least something. Is it going to turn them into a contender? No, but it's hopefully going to help them a little bit. And then you got to see what happens with Bedard too. I mean, he is a guy who this will be his sophomore season in the NHL. Is he going to have a sophomore slump? He hasn't given us any indication that he's going to, but you never know. And then they also went out and got Teuvo Teravainen back from Carolina. And so that, that could be a piece too, that the only issue with him for me is that he's very streaky. So that, that could be a blessing or a curse for them. But We'll
And then the story I wrote for Lower Broad, out of all the teams in the NHL, they had the biggest net positive in goals above replacement gain. And you look at some of the guys that they added, Teravainen, Brossois, who I mentioned earlier in goal, Tyler Bertuzzi, TJ Brody, Craig Smith. They lost a bunch of guys, but they weren't really guys that were difference makers. So net production loss, 18 goals, 39 points. Net production gain, 82 goals, 223 points. Just because they have the biggest gain in the goals above replacement, that's not really saying much because they were the worst team in the NHL last year. So by definition, like, they had more to gain than everybody else did. So if Bedard's good enough to steal some points for them, but they don't really have anyone outside of him. I mean, maybe Kurashev, but they don't really have anyone outside of him that is like another needle mover. Taylor Hall, I think, I think he'll be good, but I don't think he'll be a difference maker. So again, I think Colorado is probably going to finish the worst team in the NHL, and I hope they do because I hate Chicago.
Chicago,
not Colorado. Colorado.
You know how hard it is to score 21 more points to produce 21 more points as a team, still finish in last place and hit the under for your Vegas total. You know how hard that is to do, just statistically. Like, pick it. If the Preds scored 21 more points as a team, they'd have 120 points. Like, it's insane. It's how bad they were last year, and we're all just really devastated about that. Okay, so there you have it. Chicago's at the bottom, Dallas, Colorado, Nashville at the top. We'll decide. We'll give you official predictions on the Predators and our official division order standings and playoff picks, of course, next week. The season gets started on Thursday next week, I believe, right? So we got a lot of stuff to do. Lower Broad Hockey. There's going to be some broadcast news, I think, coming up next week, so stay tuned for that. Working on something for you guys there, for you subscribers. And, of course, you can always catch Emma's newsletter. You got the prospect guide up at the top of Lower Broad Hockey right now. It's permanently up there, so you can always go download that PDF if you're a subscriber. So go check that out, as well as the Gold Standard Extra at the beginning of each week with myself and Adam Vingan. Michael, where can good people find you on the machine, the Twitter machine?
Follow me on Twitter at mgsports_, and you can read all my work at Lower Broad Hockey, Lower Broad Pucks on Twitter.
And I'm at Emma_Lingan on Twitter, and you can get all my fun, pithy NHL insight every Friday at Lower Broad Hockey.
All that stuff is great, guys. You're doing great work. Excited about the season. Next week, we'll have the official preview pod of the entire season with all the predictions sure to go wrong for your Nashville Predators. Go to Sinkers Beverages as well. Great local business here in Nashville, serving the community for quite a long time. So go support them as well. For Michael and Emma, I am Braden. Have a great weekend, everybody. Hockey's basically here. We'll talk to you next time.